It's a little cool out today, so I thought I'd make something warming and comforting for dinner. I'm going to make some chicken and dumplings, but not just any old chicken and dumplings. I'm going to give this an Italian twist. And that includes both the spices that I've chosen for the chicken and gravy part, but also the fact that my dumplings are going to have ricotta and Parmesan cheese in them. Let's talk about ingredients. To start with, I've got 2 whole chicken breasts, which I've cut into half, and I've got 4 chicken thighs. When I went to the grocery store, they didn't have any bone-in chicken breasts or thighs, which is what I would normally use to make this dish. So I'm just going to go with this and alter my cooking method just a bit. I am going to cook them whole, and then I will take them out and cut them up smaller shortly before serving. For the rest of the ingredients, I've got 3 whole carrots that I peeled and I sliced them in large chunks on the diagonal. I like big pieces of carrots in this because I want the dish to look hearty as well as taste hearty. So I don't want any baby vegetables. I've got a 1/2 cup or 1 large stalk of celery, which I've diced up. I've got a 1/2 cup of diced onion, as well as a teaspoon of dried shallot, or you can use onion powder. I've got 2 cloves of garlic, which I diced, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. Now you might wonder, why am I doubling up on the onion and garlic? You'll get different flavors from the raw that's sauteed in butter versus the dried. So it gives you just more layers of flavor. And then I've got 1 teaspoon of dried basil, 1 teaspoon of dried thyme, a 1/2 teaspoon of tarragon. Now that's not traditionally Italian, but I love tarragon with chicken. Just don't use too much because tarragon is pretty strong. I've got a half teaspoon of rosemary and a 1/2 teaspoon of oregano. And then I've got a 1/4 cup of minced parsley with a little bit extra reserved for garnish at the end. For the gravy, I'm going to start by making a roux. So I've got 4 tablespoons of flour, and I'm going to use 1/2 of this stick of butter, or 4 tablespoons of butter. I've got some salt and pepper. Normally when you're making chicken and dumplings, if you have it bone in, skin on, you'll get enough flavor out of that when you cook it that you can use water for the gravy part. But because I don't have that, I've got some homemade chicken stock that I made last time I made a roasted chicken. I always save the bones, make stock, and put it in the freezer. So this will be the base of our gravy. Our first step is going to be to saute the onions and garlic and make a roux out of that. So I'm going to go ahead and melt down the butter. While the butter is melting, I'm going to take all of our seasonings, with the exception of the fresh parsley. I'm going to grind these up a bit with a mortar and pestle, especially because the rosemary can be very tough and woody if you don't grind that up. I often use ground rosemary, but the grocery store was out of that. So I'm going to go ahead and grind this all together and then go check on my butter. I'm going to start by adding the onions and get those going. I'm not going to cook these till they're done because obviously this is going to cook for a long time with the chicken. I just want to get them started. I'm also going to add my garlic, making sure to keep stirring so the garlic does not burn. To the onions and garlic, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of sherry. I've got a medium dry sherry here. You could use Marsala wine or even some white wine to do this. And I just want to cook that long enough to cook off the alcohol. You'll find that adding Marsala or sherry to any kind of stew really brings a depth of flavor that makes it taste like it's cooked for hours and hours, and this is not going to have to cook that long. All right, I'm going to turn this down a little bit, and I'm going to stir in my flour to make our roux. Normally for a roux, you're going to go equal parts fat, like butter or oil or whatever, with flour. And you want to mix that together, and you want to cook that for about 2 minutes. You want to get that raw flour taste out, and actually if you cook the roux a little bit longer, you're going to get a darker roux. and it's going to bring a richer flavor. So I'm just going to continually stir this and cook it for 2 minutes. It's been about 2 minutes. You can see that the roux has gotten darker. I'm going to add our spice blend, which, by the way, smells fantastic. I'm going to just give that about 10-15 seconds, toast those spices just a bit. I'm going to ladle in just a bit of our stock now to start bringing this together. If you want to know the secret to making a roux-based sauce that doesn't get lumpy, once you've done that roux, if you start out with just a little bit of the liquid at a time in the beginning, you can see I got lumps, obviously, but as I stir, it's going to incorporate all that liquid, and first it's kind of lumpy, then it'll turn into a thick paste, and as I continue to add stock, it'll get thinner and thinner until I add the rest of the stock or the cream or whatever. So this is what I do when I'm making a bechamel as well. I've got it now to the consistency of a kind of thin sauce, and if you think it's lumps, remember I have pieces of onion in there. So that's actually what you're seeing. I'm going to add the chicken now in the bottom. Again, this is boneless and skinless. I've got breast and thigh meat because some people like dark, some people like white. I just like the combination. And that's just about enough to cover the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to put the carrots in. The carrots and the chicken are obviously the things that will take the longest to cook. You may notice I did not add the celery yet. I like the celery to have just a little bit of texture in it in the finished product and not just be mushy. So I add the celery and the fresh parsley towards the end. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the stock. And we're just going to let this simmer on the stove for a bit until the chicken is done. I'm going to give it a little bit of salt and pepper at this time, and then when we get toward the end, I will taste the gravy and see if it needs more. But you do want, especially the salt, to cook into the chicken and vegetables and not just be a layer of salt on top of everything if you add it at the end. A trick I've learned watching chefs on TV is to save the rind when you grate Parmesan or Romano, and it goes great into your soups or even sauces. It's going to bring a little bit of creaminess and a little bit more saltiness, which is one of the reasons I hold back on the salt in the beginning here. And then I'll fish that out at the end. A lot of it will melt into the gravy, but not all of it. I'm going to let this cook covered on medium for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then I'll check the chicken and the carrots to see their doneness. While the chicken and vegetables are simmering away, I'm going to start the dumplings. I've got 1 cup of flour. I've got a 15-ounce container of whole milk ricotta. I would not suggest using the part skim. You're not going to get the rich flavor, and the texture will change a bit. I've got a 1/2 cup of shredded Parmesan, and I saved a little bit to shred on top of the chicken and dumplings when I serve it. I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of dried basil, 1 egg, salt and pepper. And then I've got a cookie sheet lined with parchment and a small scoop. So I'm ready to do this and I don't have to stop and collect anything. The first thing I'm going to do is put the ricotta into the bowl and add the Parmesan and mix those together. If you use the back of your spatula or a fork, it's easier to incorporate all this. I'm going to add the egg. You do not need to beat it. You can just put it right in. Just don't get any shells in there. Get that mixed in. You want to handle this carefully, so don't overmix it. Only mix it as much as you have to. I'm going to add my basil, and I'm going to crush that up so it's nice and fine, but it also helps to release the oils. I'm going to add a pinch of pepper and a pinch of salt. You don't want to add too much salt because there is salt in both the ricotta and in the Parmesan. So I'm going to go ahead and get that just mixed together. I've got that nicely combined. It's nice and smooth. The eggs all incorporated. I'm going to add half this flour, and now this is the point where you don't want to overwork. Once you get the flour in, you get the gluten going. We don't want tough dumplings. So put about half of that in and mix it in gently. I've got all that flour combined in. I'm going to set that aside. Take a little bit of this remaining flour to keep it from sticking. I'm going to put this out onto the board, and by hand, very gently, I'm going to work in the rest of the flour. This is a sticky process. You notice I took off my jacket because I'm going to be working with my hands. So I'm just going to work this in gently. It's very sticky right now, but it will come together. Now it's time to form our dumplings. I'm going to use the scoop. You could roll it out into logs and cut it up, but I like the evenness that you get from the scoop. And I like them a little bigger. I don't like them too small, which you would get if you do with the log. So I'm just trying to level that off and get an even amount in each one. I've got a little extra flour here if my hands start getting too sticky. You should get about 24 dumplings out of this recipe. I actually got 26, and you can see how absolutely easy that was to make these dumplings. I'm going to cover them with plastic and put them in the refrigerator. Number one, my chicken and gravy and vegetables are not yet ready for the addition of the dumplings. But number two, and actually more importantly, I like these to have a little time to chill and firm up, because they will cook better, they won't fall apart in the gravy. You could actually make these in the morning and just chill them until you're ready to put them into the pot. And that'll be just the last few minutes. So, into the fridge we go. It's been about 20 minutes. I'm just checking this. The chicken is just about ready to come out and be cut up into smaller bits. And the carrots do need more time to cook. So I'm going to give this about another 5 minutes, take the chicken out, cut it into large chunks, and then return it back into the stock. My 5 minutes are up. I'm going to take the chicken out, but I'm going to leave the stock and the vegetables cooking so they can continue to thicken and the carrots can get done. I'm just going to use my spider to get out just the chicken, hopefully. And not the carrots. Also, if you find any bits of fat, take those out. I've got the chicken out of the pot. I'm going to cut it into some fairly good chunks. And if you get any gristly pieces, you'll often find those on the thighs. You can take those off. And this is not completely cooked. It's going to go back into the pot. I like some substantial chunks. I want this, as I said, I want it to look hearty as well as taste hearty. So I'm going to continue to cut up these pieces of chicken and get them into the gravy. There's my chicken all chunked up. I've got quite a bit of chicken. Now, if you think this is too much for your pot of chicken and dumplings, you could set some aside and make a great chicken salad sandwich. Or you could freeze it and save it for when you want to make a quick chicken soup. You could just use some canned stock, some fresh onion and celery, and then put in some frozen or canned vegetables, and you can make a quick chicken soup for dinner. It's time to finish up the chicken and dumplings. I'm going to simmer the gravy and vegetables for about 5 to 10 minutes until it gets a little bit thicker. And I will not have to add any extra thickener because we already had the flour in the roux. Then I will add the chicken, the celery, the parsley, and a cup of frozen peas. Let that heat up a bit, and then I'll add the dumplings. I'm going to give this a taste as well. Check for salt and pepper levels. It's really good broth, but it does need a little bit more salt. And I am also going to add a little bit of half and half, just to make the gravy a little richer. So maybe a half cup. And now we're going to let that simmer uncovered so it thickens up a bit. You can see the gravy is starting to get thicker. There's two schools of thought on chicken and dumplings. One is it's basically a chicken soup and you just add the dumplings to it, in which case you could actually just add the dumplings directly into the gravy, spoon them in, or even drizzle them in so they come out almost like spatzel. That's how my great-grandma used to make it, but my grandma made it, second school of thought. It's more like a stew consistency, and she would form the dumplings and then place them in and let them simmer or almost steam in the pot. And you can see I'm going to put all that chicken in. I've got a lot of people to feed tonight. So we've got our chicken in. I'm going to add our celery, our 1/4 cup of parsley, and I did reserve that little bit extra for garnish later. You can see it's getting thick just as I'm speaking here. And then I've got about a cup of frozen peas left here. I'll go ahead and put those in. You could put corn in. You could put any vegetable in here you like. But I really want the gravy and the dumplings to be the star of this show. So I'm going to let that come up to temperature just a bit, and then I'm going to put the dumplings in. The gravy has gotten pretty thick. I also fished out that Parmesan rind. There wasn't too much left to it, so it did give some good flavor to this. I'm going to add in my dumplings. And I'm going to put them in very gently with the help of my little spider. And I'm going to let them simmer in there for about 5 to 6 minutes until they're done. I don't want to overcook them because I want them to stay tender. And then it'll be time to eat. These dumplings are also delicious with marinara sauce. What you can do is simmer them for that 5 to 6 minutes in a pot of salted boiling water like you would gnocchi. And then just put them in a bowl and pour some hot marinara over them and a little shave of extra parm maybe. And I talked earlier about making a quick chicken soup using stock and maybe a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store and frozen vegetables. And if you made these dumplings, everybody would think you put in a lot of effort into that chicken and dumpling soup. I had some leftover spinach, so I made a little salad. With the spinach, I got some bell pepper and a little bit of peppadew on there and a couple of black olives. I made a quick vinaigrette. I found this wonderful product at our grocery store, Prosecco white vinegar. So it's like champagne vinegar, but it's even better. And then I'm going to top this with just a little bit of shaved parm that I had saved. And so we can each have a little bit of salad to go along with our delicious chicken and dumplings. It's time to dish up. You can see it bubbling away. It's gotten nice and thick. the dumplings expanded a little. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of the nice chicken, vegetables, the dumplings. You can see it's a little thicker than a soup, but not quite as thick as a stew. So there's our beautiful bowl. I'm going to garnish it with a little Parmesan and a sprinkling of fresh parsley. And I think it's time to eat. Here we have our finished product served with a nice glass of white wine. This goes to prove that a simple, homey dish can make a great and elegant dinner if you just present it right.